Hi, everyone. This is going to be an addition to our series that we did a couple of weeks ago on Was Paul Conned? And this will be part 6. And I wanted to uh, address an issue that I wanted to make sure was clear. Is Paul claims without doubt that he saw Jesus physically on that road to Damascus, and that other people could perceive the event at the same time. Either they saw the light and they heard a voice, or they didn't, or they heard the voice but didn't understand the voice. These are other things. So the point is that the way Paul describes this event, he is saying it physically happened. It wasn't a vision. It wasn't being communicated like the next thing that happens. He's at the temple in Acts 22, and during an ecclesia, he sees Jesus, which he says, "I'm praying." And an ecstasy is usually this thing where you can't control your body and you're literally hallucinating or you're having visions inside of your head. But in the road to Damascus, this is completely an event which he describes as a physical appearance. But I want to prove that to you. And I also want to show you how Paul defenders actually make the point that he physically saw Jesus there to make him equal. They're trying to make him equal to the 12. Unwittingly, they are destroying Paul's validity, because we all know there's the Son of Man prophecy that requires that Jesus will not physically appear on earth again till he comes with all the saints in glory. And if he doesn't come that way, and if he comes in a private wilderness place or private room, it's not him, it's a phony Jesus. And that's why we're going to look at this more closely today, so there's no doubt in anyone's mind. That's what Paul says he experienced. So let's take a look, and I have the verses here, and we'll review some other verses from John and Jesus. Okay, so one of the things we need to always be doing with Paul is, and others who are coming here, and I'm saying that we believe, or I believe, that the Paul of Jesus conned him, and it wasn't Jesus at all. Okay, and we have a whole series of proof prior to this point. But I want to show that Jesus gave us another criteria for how we judge the event with Paul. So do we take it at face value? If Paul says this happened, do we just assume it's true? No. Jesus taught us something very important. He says appearances can be deceiving. Quote, stop judging by mere appearance, but instead judge correctly. John 7:24. So stop right there. Paul tells you this is what happened to him. This is what somebody else said happened to him. Ananias, for an example. We just take it all at face value? No. You don't judge by appearances. You judge correctly. So the whole thing is this. If Jesus said, and it's in Matthew and it's in Mark, that he's not coming back physically until every eye sees him on earth, and if somebody says you saw me in a private room or you saw me in a wilderness, it's not me, it's a false Christ. That's all you need to know. Ananias is a nobody to me. Paul is a nobody to me. You have to start out that way, that you don't have to side with them. It's just the appearance or the illusion that they're telling you something that is not that they're lying, but they're telling you something that is Jesus. And that's the question. Is it Jesus? And Jesus says no, but many false Christs will come in his name. And so that's what we conclude. It's a false Jesus. It's not a true Jesus. Not that Paul didn't experience it, not that Ananias didn't see a vision, but it is not coming from Christ. Okay? Because it can't. Jesus has prohibited it. Even if Ananias was the most holy man on earth, and we don't know who he is even, historically we don't even know what he became of him. And the people on the road with Paul, nobody knows who they are. So there's such a lack of evidence to corroborate the story. But we're not trying to discount the story actually happened to some degree. Just that these other witnesses, we cannot reliably conclude based on the appearance of the situation that they are not deceived themselves by a false Christ, and everything tells us that Jesus commanded these would be false Christs. So anyway, let's remember, stop judging by mere appearance, but instead judge correctly. And Proverbs says in 14:2, simile teaches you this: there's a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death. So that could have, the Paulinists will say that could apply to you guys. Yes, it could apply to us, and that's why we're being careful and why we're going studiously this. But it could equally apply to you. You could be judging in terms, I would say, to the Paulinists. You could be judging by appearances, and you could be heading for death. What is more likely? I'm judging based on what Jesus says as the sign of the Son of Man. You're basing it solely on your credence in Paul's account that he wasn't duped, that he knows for a fact that was Jesus, when you know what? That he never even knew Jesus in the flesh beforehand. So how would he know this is the true Jesus? Did you any of that cross your mind? But let's keep going. I want to make a point here and make a proof that we need to make sure that's nailed down, that this is a physical appearance, and we're going to see that's what Paul claims it is. All right, but first of all, we all need to remind ourselves, what did Jesus say in the sign of Son of Man prophecy? Matthew 24, verses 5, 23 to 27. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is the Christ, or here believe it not, for there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders. Did the Jesus of Paul show signs and wonders? Yes, he appeared in this great light. In one version, Paul said it was brighter than the sun for him, his perception. So as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. Was Paul an elect? No, he was a murderer and a blasphemer by his own statements to Timothy in a letter to Timothy. So as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. Behold, I have told you beforehand, if therefore they shall say unto you, Behold, he is in the wilderness, go not forth. Behold, he is in the inner chambers, believe it not. Where did this happen with Paul? Outside Damascus, as he was coming near it. And in the biblical definition of what is wilderness, it's anything outside a city, because in those days, everything outside a city is wilderness. For as the lightning comes forth from the east, and it's a plural, from every point east is what it really means, and is seen even unto the west, and it's a plural again, meaning every point west, so it's every point east and west. It would be like lightning coming from every direction, east and west. So shall be the coming of the Son of Man. It's not going to come in a corner of the earth called Damascus on the outskirts in the wilderness with two other people who are unknown. Some other guy, Ananias, 2 weeks later says, I had a vision of Jesus telling me you're going to have a great mission, Paul, to the Gentiles. No, that's not how Jesus said he would return. Do you understand that? People who are Paulinists, that you are a fan of a guy who doesn't have a story that can line up against this. Your master, who you think is your master, who is leading you supposedly to follow Paul, but you've not asked the basic question, is this the true Jesus Christ? And the answer is, we're going to find out. Because the only way Paul's going to pass this test if he says this is a vision that nobody else could see but me. But if he claims this is a physical appearance, he's doomed. And that's the difference, because he's claiming Jesus physically appeared in front of him. If that's what he's claiming, then this is not the true Jesus Christ. If he said it was a vision in his head, you might give him a pass, but that's not what he claims, and I'm going to prove it to you. Okay, and again, just before we get there, I want us to read a little bit more of commentary. Henry Alford, Doctor of Divinity, Dean of Canterbury, so he's a high-level mucky in England, wrote the New Testament in English for English readers in 1868. He had a beautiful passage where he's describing what does the Matthew 24 passage mean. So he refers to the for many will come in my name. And he says this was the first danger awaiting them, not of being drawn away from Christ, but of imagining that these persons were himself. So you see, it's a con artist. It's somebody pretending to be Jesus. Now I tell you what I think who it is. Okay, I think it's Satan, okay? But you are going to say, no, that's the Lord Jesus. How do you know? How does Paul know? He doesn't know Jesus. How could he verify? And the two men with him surely couldn't. We don't even know their names. But let's continue. So now we're going to get down to nitty-gritty. Paul describes this as a physical appearance of Jesus to himself in the same sense Jesus appeared to the 12 apostles first. Quote, he says this, and this is in 1 Corinthians 5 and 8, and also, well, just in 5 and 8. He says, he appeared to Cephas, Peter, then the 12, and he also appeared to me. So he's putting himself clearly on the same level with the same appearance as if he were Peter or 12 standing outside the tomb, and Jesus is being mistaken for a gardener and whatever. When he's moving around and talking to the apostles, that is what Paul is claiming. He had the same experience. And he even says in 1 Corinthians 9:1, I have seen the Lord. Okay, so that's visually, not in a vision, not a imagination, not something subjective, but something physical he saw. And we're going to see that Paul fans, Paul defenders claim this is a physical appearance, and I'm going to show you where they admit this. All right, Philip Schaff will be one witness, one confirmation. The famous evangelical scholar and historian agrees. He says Paul put his experience outside Damascus, quote, on a level with the former appearances to the older apostles, 1 Corinthians 15:8. Okay? Philip Schaff, History of the Christian Church, 1888, Volume 1 at 180. Extremely reputable Christian writer and historian, says it's exactly the same. Paul is saying it's exactly the same as if it were Peter or anyone else of the apostles who saw Jesus after the resurrection. That's what Paul says his experience was. He's on the same level as all of them. Now, a recent PhD, professor of New Testament studies, named Charles Quarles, he teaches biblical theology, a professor of New Testament studies and biblical theology, and he's a director of the PhD studies at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. He has published several books on Jesus, Paul, and New Testament themes. And the best proof of anything is when someone completely unwittingly unravels and destroys Paul without me having to say a word. So you know now that Jesus's warning is someone's going to say, that's me in the wilderness. And that person, the fraud, is going to appear just as if he were Christ himself if you didn't know better. But Jesus is saying, I'm not returning. I will not return until an event where every eye on earth sees me, both every point east and west. So this event, the only way Paul can have not be considered complete fraud would be if he only would have validity if it's a vision. In other words, that he only can see Jesus. It wasn't a true physical appearance. He did not see the resurrected Christ. Okay, if Christ came down to see Paul, then that is a violation of the sign of the Son of Man and is a false Christ by definition. But this is what Quarles thinks he needs to prove in order to prove that Paul is on the same level, or he may be higher than the 12. But he's at least trying to prove, you'll see in this article, that Paul insists that he saw an objective Jesus standing in front of him in a light physically. So let's keep going. Okay, so here's his article. It appears in the spring 2016 edition of The City, and I think it's committed to the resurrection, this particular episode or particular volume, a publication of the Houston Baptist University. This was published or posted July 1, 2016. It's entitled Paul is a Witness to the Resurrection of Jesus by Charles L. Quarles. That's that professor. And there's the URL if you want to find it. I'm sure you could just search the name of the article and find it. Begins. Clear statements elsewhere in Pauline literature would preclude such a view, i.e. that it was a subjective experience. So he's starting right on the very question I'm talking about. And again, he has no clue that he's burying Paul. He unwittingly buries Paul by what he's saying. Every word is sending Paul down into the pit where this man is proving Paul met a false Jesus, but he doesn't know it. And that's the best way to prove this to you, because he doesn't know that he's destroying Paul. He thinks he's elevating Paul. He thinks he's helping Paul, but he's destroying Paul when you know the passage of Matthew 24. And just let me add one thing, is look how ignorant our people can go to seminary, study everything about Jesus, but the one thing they were told by Jesus to be alertive, he's the Son of Man, mentions it 81 times. He's referring over and over again to the Son of Man prophecy of Daniel 7. Then he literally takes the Son of Man prophecy and applies it to himself in Matthew 7:24. And these people can go through all of that, all of these experiences, all this education, and they could actually miss it. This guy completely missed it, obviously, because he doesn't think these are bad facts. He thinks these are great facts to prove Paul. They're the worst things to prove Paul because you've just destroyed his validity. So let's keep going. For example, Paul argued that he was as surely an apostle as were the 12 and the Lord's brothers. Am I not an apostle? Question mark. Have I not seen Jesus our Lord? 1 Corinthians 9:1. The Greek grammar of both questions implies a positive response, meaning Paul was affirming he was an apostle and he had seen Jesus, not envisioned him or saw him in a vision. He literally saw him. Now we're going to go to this next quote from Quarles. And what's interesting is you can see why he's mistaken. Why he doesn't realize this is hurting Paul. Because he doesn't know there's a difference between a pre-ascension Jesus resurrection and a post-ascension after he's gone to heaven and he's not coming back until the second coming, and he supposedly makes a special trip just for this one guy, this murderer blasphemer. Okay, so let's listen to what he says. Quarles says this. The logic of Paul's argument is that Paul's status is equivalent to that of the 12 and the Lord's brothers because the post-resurrection appearance of Jesus to Paul was equivalent to that which the other apostles witnessed. Except, Quarles, you didn't pay attention. All the appearances of Jesus to the 12 were pre-ascension. Paul's is post-ascension. Completely material fact that destroys Paul. If you can prove all these things, and you're about now to, we're going to listen to you proving something that you're going to now later, when you find out this is going to destroy Paul, if you're not loyal to Jesus Christ, you're going to try to defend Paul, and you're going to try to retract everything you said, and you're going to try to argue the opposite. So that's why we're going to have to see that there's no way out of it. You buried Paul because there's no way to take back these statements. This is also implied by Paul placing himself along with Cephas, Peter, the 12, and 500, James, and the rest of the apostles on the list of those to whom the resurrected Jesus appeared. Paul's statement that he, quote, also appeared to me, and then we have to go to the next page, and that's in 1 Corinthians 15:8. Okay, so he also appeared to me, offers a more robust description of the nature of the Damascus Road experience than the casual reader may realize. And this is where he really buries Paul. Because you might say, well, an appearance, what's that mean? It could be maybe in his mind. But he's now going to show you the word appearance is, that same word for appearance is used for something distinctly about the resurrection of Jesus Christ elsewhere. Appeared, he says, is the same verb used in 1 Corinthians 15:5, 6, and 7 to describe those who discovered the empty tomb. So Paul describes the people who, he says, I was in a series of people. First, he appeared to the people who saw the empty tomb. Then he appeared to Cephas and the 12, saw the resurrected Jesus in the upper room, ate with him on the shores of the sea. So he's saying appeared is used over and over again by Paul about people who actually saw the physical Jesus. The same verb. Very, very cogent, very good argument, Mr. Quarles. Thank you very much. You're burying Paul, but you don't know it. And that's the beauty of what you're doing. Because those of us who are trying to bring to our brothers and sisters the point that Paul is a hidden rock that we're tripping over, and we're not following Christ because we're following Paul. He's dominating the landscape, and he has a totally different gospel than Jesus Christ. It needs to stop. It needs to be put an end to. Okay, so let's continue with Quarles unwittingly burying Paul. So he next says, Paul evidently appealed to his own eyewitness account of Jesus' post-resurrection appearance. This is implied by the charge from Paul's Jesus. This is Paul's Jesus speaking. And so Paul's Jesus says this, for I have appeared to you for this purpose, to appoint you as a servant and a witness, notice not apostle, of what you have seen and of what I will reveal to you. So a couple of comments here is number one, I believe that God says he allows false prophets. He obviously allows false Christs. For the same reason he allows false prophets. Why was that? God in Deuteronomy 13:1-10 says, I allow false prophets to test you to see whether you love me, God, Yahweh, with your whole heart and soul. Okay? And if they teach you to go a different direction than I've taught you here today at Sinai, then you know you are not to listen to them. Even if they have signs and wonders and miracles, you must reject them as apostates. It's called the law of apostasy because in the Greek translation of verse 10, the word apostasy appears. Okay, so I believe that's why this Jesus was allowed to say, I have appeared to you, because that will help confirm for all time that this Jesus is himself saying, I'm physically appearing to you. Paul has said so far he's physically appearing, but now we have Jesus, Paul's Jesus, and Paul himself both agreeing that this Jesus, this false Jesus, this Jesus of the road of Damascus, they both agree that he appeared to him. It's not just something, it's a vision out in his mind. And if I didn't mention this already, is I believe God also put a restraint in here, and it's reflected right here in this verse. God said to this false Jesus before he was allowed to test Paul, you're never allowed in any of the vision accounts to ever be quoted saying that, Paul, I'm picking you as an apostle. You can say he'll be your servant, you can say he'll be your witness, but you'll never say he is my son's apostle. Okay? So go for it. Test them, but I'll never let you cross that line, because that will confuse people more than I want. God saying, I don't want them to be overly confused. So you, false Jesus, I'm allowing you to test them, but you can never say in any of these passages that he's an apostle of yours. Okay? And so false Jesus says, okay. so the bottom line is, Paul actually has confirmation from his Jesus that he had an appearance, a physical appearance, and not a vision of Jesus on that road to Damascus. Okay, so next Quarles says that Paul clearly emphasized the fact that he had seen the Lord on the road and that he had talked to him. So again, Paul's own words can be used against him if people try to squirm out of Paul being subject to the Son of Man prophecy. He says he saw the Lord. He's one person who saw the Lord, just like all the other people did. All right, so Professor Quarles continues in his unwitting burial of Paul, is the validity of Paul. That is Paul's words, and we ourselves proclaim to you good news of the promise that was made to our ancestors, Acts 13:32, show that Paul's identifying himself as an equally reliable witness to the resurrection. And all I will say again is he is verifying the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who had ascended and said, I'm not coming back that way. So whoever Paul met cannot be Jesus. That's all we know. That's all we have to know. I don't have to prove he's Satan, but who else could it be? But we don't have to go there. We just have to simply say he's just not Jesus. He can't be. Jesus told us, and that's not how he's returning. Quarles continues. Jesus' resurrection featured prominently in Paul's preaching in Thessalonica, Acts 17:3, Athens 17:31, and evidently in Corinth. So Paul is, yes, this is what he's claiming, his claim to fame. He's not even claiming that Jesus made him an apostle in that event, right? So his only claim to fame is he's saying, I saw the physical Jesus, and so therefore I'm just like you guys, the 12 apostles. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so Paul's question in 1 Corinthians 9:1, haven't I seen, am I not an apostle? Am I not someone who saw Jesus? Assumes the church's familiarity with his Damascus Road experience, despite the absence of previous references to it in the extant letters to the Corinthian church, and this implies that the testimony to Jesus' post-resurrection appearance to Paul was standard fare in his preaching. Okay, so I don't know why he's throwing it in there. That's conjecture. And in fact, if it was standard fare, you would assume that Paul would have put it in his own epistles, which, by the way, it's very odd that it isn't in his epistles anywhere where he explains in his own handwriting, not somebody else's, what exactly happened. But anyway, we don't know, but speculation why he didn't ever write about it either, directly, the whole account. This cumulative evidence shows that Paul should be regarded as one of the most important witnesses to the resurrection of Jesus. So you see, this proves that Quarles did not intend to hurt Paul. He intended to prove that he is what? One of the most important witnesses to the resurrection of Jesus. And my view is he is not only not a witness to the resurrection of Jesus, this proved a prophecy of Jesus came true, that people would be deceived by a false Jesus appearing in the wilderness. It's actually a proof of a prophecy of Jesus Christ. And then when you study Paul and you see all the horrendous doctrines he teaches, and I'm not talking just faith alone. I mean, if you read some of the stuff he says about the Sabbath, like you're cursed to obey Sabbath. Who in their right mind would say that? I mean, the most he should have said is, it's, he did say in Romans at one point, well, one day is like another, so you could do whatever you want, right? And you don't have to follow Sabbath, but if you want to, I mean, that was sort of a permissive. You could if you think it's important or not. But in Galatians, he's slamming them. He's slamming them. Why do you want to believe? Oh, you foolish Galatians! Not just on circumcision, but on Sabbath. And he says, you foolish Galatians, the law was given by angels through mediator Moses, and they are no gods, and they're weak and beggarly elements. Why do you want to be in bondage again? And if you follow the Sabbath, you're going to have to follow every law, and cursed, you'll be cursed if you don't follow every law. I mean, he did everything he could to scare the living daylights out of him. Oh my gosh, we better not obey Sabbath. We're going to get cursed because now we got to follow every law, and we don't even know what they all are. Do you see what evil doctrine he was teaching? That's not even possibly from God. That is not even by a remotest chance on earth could God say that Moses didn't receive the law from me, God. But Paul just made this up. It has no rabbinic history, has nothing. People, by the way, will say, oh, well, wait a minute. Didn't Stephen, the martyr, claim that the law was given by angels? Yes. And who was the witness who probably gave that to Paul? I mean, who gave that to Luke? Well, Paul was watching Stephen die. So he could easily fill that in and not realize it's from himself. But you know what? If Stephen said it, even though he's dying as a martyr, it doesn't make me believe it. It's what? What, Stephen a prophet now? Not just a martyr? You see, people just will just endlessly find excuses when even everybody agrees. When you read in the book of Exodus, God, Yahweh gave the law. But because Paul says it wasn't given by God, they claim the law wasn't given by God. This is the craziness of following Paul. And so now there is no excuse. Quarles has buried Paul. If you think that he didn't experience a physical appearance of Jesus Christ and you want to imagine it's a vision, you don't have any evidence. You have zero. It's all the evidence stacks up that Paul is saying I had an appearance identical to the 12. I saw him physically resurrected. Boom, done. And Paul ends up burying himself by his own words. So really, Quarles didn't bury him. So I'm going to take Mr. Quarles off the hook right now. He didn't bury him. He's just showing you the verses from Paul that buried Paul. Paul buried Paul. Paul did himself in because he talks so much. And he said it over and over again. He wanted to make sure you knew how close he is to this Lord Jesus, who he's claiming now to follow. And he doesn't know the sign of the Son of Man. He never mentions the word Son of Man, as we mentioned in a prior episode. Anyway, I hope this helps everybody, particularly those people who are on the Pauline side, who have excuse after excuse, that they don't have to follow the sign of the Son of Man, that Paul can have visions and so on. This isn't a vision. This is an appearance. That's what he said. You got to live with it. You got to also reassess who you are following. Are you following Jesus, the real Jesus, or are you following the Jesus of Paul? Because they're two totally different Jesuses. Totally. One's evil, and I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure the guy who gave Matthew 24, he's the good guy. Whoever this other guy is who's telling Paul the law is given by angels and Sabbath is something that's going to curse you if you follow, I mean, that's the guy you got to really got to think about. Please, please, please take time, save yourself from him. You'll save yourself a lot of agony in eternity by doing just a few minutes, double checking what I'm telling you. Research it yourself. There's no way you can come away from this and not conclude the right thing to do is just stick with Jesus Christ, the one who gave you Matthew 24. Okay, God bless. Take care, everybody. Ciao.